edition of WeatherScope. Comprehensive severe weather coverage from the Weather Channel Forecast Center.
A very pleasant Monday morning to you. Thank you so much for joining us on the Weather Channel on this Labor Day. Of course, we are laboring pretty hard here as we're keeping you updated on the very latest with Edouard. You know, it's been about a week or so that we've been watching this storm, and it continues to churn the waters and cause problems. It is now a Category 1 on the Saffir-Simpson scale, but of main interest because it gets closer to the coast here of Massachusetts. The latest on Edouard centers the storm at 39.8 degrees north, 69.5 degrees west. That translates to about 105 miles south-southeast of Nantucket Island, with winds now of Edouard up to 90 miles an hour. It is moving due north at 14, and the lowest pressure 961 millibars. Look at the track of Edouard over the last several days as it first came off the West African coast and got closer to the northeastern Caribbean islands, past the islands now well to the north, so we did not get directly affected by this hurricane over the northeastern islands. But as it started to move west toward the Bahamas, then it made a turn to the north and now heading for the New England coast, and again just off the coast of Massachusetts, only about 105 miles south-southeast of Nantucket, with winds now of 90 miles an hour. And that has been the main concern with our hurricane, is the very gusty winds associated with it, as we've had reports of winds gusting out of the northeast right near the island here of Nantucket and the Cape Cod area, at times gusting up to 40 and 50 miles an hour. So very windy conditions we've had reports of. Some of the trees and the limbs been broken down because of the gusty winds, and that has created some power outages in the area. Okay, let's see the strike probability. Now we have for you in the red the highest chance that the center of the storm will cross over, and you can see that the highest probability skirts right off the coast here of Massachusetts, just east of Nantucket Island. And when we talk of the coastal areas of Massachusetts, we have for you live our very own Bill Keneally, who's standing by in Chatham, Massachusetts, right off the coast in the eastern parts of the state, and he has for us the very latest. How is it going right now, Bill?
Well, Vivian, here it is 4 o'clock in the morning, and we continue to see the winds picking up. The rain is still coming on down, and it looks as though things are not getting any better here. You mentioned it's still about 105 miles south of here upon the last advisory, so things have deteriorated considerably. Our hotel is about a mile away, and as we drove on in today, we saw a fair amount of branches down, no major trees down as of yet, but the wind is definitely starting to take its toll. It did bring our power out for a couple of hours in the hotel, but there's still power in this local area. By the way, we are right at the elbow of Cape Cod, so we are about as far south and east on Cape Cod as one could get.
Okay, I can see it looks fairly windy there, Bill, but you say that you've had no reports of any major trees down, just a few branches, huh?
That is correct, Vivian. So far, so good in that category. Now, we've had a high tide in the past half hour. The tide went high in the area. Now, the concern is not as much on the ocean behind me, but more on Cape Cod Bay. And with that northeast wind, the problems usually are from the Barnstable Harbor area around towards Sagamore, right by the Cape Cod Canal. But now as the hurricane is starting to draw near, the winds are starting to back a little bit more to the north, and the concern will be on the southeastern corner of Cape Cod Bay, over by the Brewster area, as well as in Dennis, so we'll be watching for that. Oh, we certainly will. As a matter of fact, some pretty big storm surges are expected with our hurricane. Thanks very much, Bill, and we'll check back with you in about 30 minutes. Thank you. I'll tell you what, this has been a major story over the last week or so, as Edouard has had quite a journey and quite a legacy as it crossed over the mid-Atlantic and now moving toward the New England area. Let's show you our watches and warnings that remain in effect for the area, as we still have tropical storm warnings from East Point, Maine, all the way to Merrimack River, and from Fire Island here right on the Long Island Sound. Now, hurricane warnings remain in effect for the east coast of Massachusetts. There you see from Watch Hill, Rhode Island, up to the Merrimack River area. So we will keep you posted on the very latest on our hurricane as it continues to move to the north. Now, again, we've had reports of northeast winds in excess of 30, 40, and up to 50 miles an hour at times, and things will just get worse before they get better, at least over the next 6 to 12 hours or so. There you see your storm surges, 6 to 10 feet are expected for the Cape Cod area. So some big problems. We have windy conditions, and it is wet this morning, as we have reports of
of rain and very, very windy conditions in Boston with our latest, of course, on Hurricane Edouard. We'll keep you posted on Edouard and more details on Hurricane Fran for you coming up.
Nutrition Centers. Gold Card members, this Tuesday you save 20% off everything. So jot it down. 20% discount savings at GNC. Want a Gold Card? Join at GNC. Gold Card members, see you Tuesday.
Weather. Every day it moves and changes. There's something happening somewhere, and we bring you all of it in WeatherScope, the day's top weather stories, with live on-the-scene reports during major breaking events, up-to-the-minute forecasts for the nation and specific regions, and fascinating insight that lets you understand exactly what's happening and why. WeatherScope, it's all the weather you want, every 30 minutes on the hour and half hour on the Weather Channel. Right now, the weather is changing. What's here today can be gone tomorrow. Because we know you need to plan and prepare, we dedicate a special team to forecasting the outlook for the days ahead. So you know what to expect. Watch our 5-day planner, 20 minutes after every hour on the Weather Channel. No place on Earth has better weather. Hurricane Edouard is bearing down on New England. Stay with the Weather Channel for comprehensive, up-to-the-minute forecasts and analysis. Now your local forecast.
Will I get over it? I can't take this anymore. What is it? And what does it mean?
Are you troubled by feelings you can't explain? The answer is just a...
Time now for our Pacific Regional Update. First, though, we want to take a look at the latest information on Edouard. The latest coordinates have Edouard centered at 39.8 north, 69.5 west. It puts it 105 miles south-southeast of Nantucket Island. Winds 90 miles per hour. It's moving to the north at 14 miles per hour. Pressure now 961 millibars. So that's the latest on Edouard. Let's see what's in store for the forecast for the west, though. Monday morning, still watching this frontal boundary. Rain and thunderstorms along at the tail end of the front, sort of stalling out somewhat here in the west by the afternoon. We've got the monsoonal moisture in place, the heating of the afternoon, scattered showers and thunderstorms here in the southwest. Into Southern California we go, where cloud cover will be around in the morning hours, lows in the 60s. By the afternoon, San Diego up to 77 at the Civic Center. You can expect a high of 88 degrees. And we'll also have some cloud cover for San Francisco
and Monterey, lows in the mid-50s. Your high temperature around 71 in San Francisco. Most of the cloud cover burning off by the afternoon hours. A high of 72 for Monterey. And the northwest, Seattle, a low of 53, Portland 54, 48 in Salem. And by the afternoon, temperatures warming up quite nicely into the 70s. 71 in Seattle, 78 in Portland, and 79 for a high in Salem. Stay tuned. Your local forecast is coming up. How many children you're going to have?
Celebrity psychics.
Let me see. Ooh, 11 children.
Got money coming. How much do I see?
I see beautiful things ahead in your future.
$9,000.
Free sample reading.
You must be joking.
Tired of phony predictions from phony psychics? Here's what psychic solution callers have to say.
I'm happy about how it went because, I don't know, it just helped me, have more peace of mind.
At first I was like, she probably was just going to say whatever, but she told me so many things about my past. It was very true, very true.
She told me that there was going to be money in my future if I just stuck to it and stayed with my creativeness. And that really convinced me. It gave me all the confidence to keep going.
It was very nice. She and I just, kind of cozy along. I felt very comfortable with her. I said it was actually like talking to one of my best friends, only a little bit better.
Convince yourself with a free sample reading. Real psychics are waiting to talk with you. So call for your free sample reading now. Call 1-800-281-1858.
Weather. Every day it moves and changes. There's something happening somewhere, and we bring you all of it in WeatherScope, the day's top weather stories, with live on-the-scene reports during major breaking events, up-to-the-minute forecast for the nation and specific regions, and fascinating insight that lets you understand exactly what's happening and why. WeatherScope, it's all the weather you want, every 30 minutes on the hour and half hour on the Weather Channel.
Channel offers many fascinating products you can order right over the phone. To receive your free catalog, call 1-800-250-5979 today.
Eastern Time, we're here at the Weather Channel live giving you the very latest on our storm. Of course, Hurricane Edouard continues to churn the waters as it moves closer and closer to the coast of Massachusetts. We want to remind you that all tropical storm and hurricane forecast positions are provided to the Weather Channel by the National Hurricane Center in Miami, Florida. Here's a look at the track of Edouard. It's been several days that we've watched our hurricane. It has gone from a Category 4 now to a Category 1 on the Saffir-Simpson scale, but it is still of main concern because of its proximity to the east coast here. Look at Massachusetts, the winds up to about 90 miles an hour with our storm. As a matter of fact, we've had reports of winds out of the north in eastern Massachusetts gusting up to 50 miles an hour at times. So very, very windy conditions. It is raining. It is just ugly this morning in the eastern parts of Massachusetts with our storm just off the coast. The lowest pressure we could find with Edouard, 961 millibars. It's about 105 miles southeast of Nantucket Island, and you can see that it is centered at 39.8 degrees north, 69.5 degrees west. We'll keep you updated on Edouard. Here it is, right here, sticking out like a sore thumb along the coast of Massachusetts. Storm surges today, expected 10 to 12 feet or so for the Cape Cod vicinity as those north and northeast winds hit up against the coast. The storm lifts off to the north. Low pressure developing over the south, keeping it very soggy. Low clouds will linger, light rain showers throughout much of the day, much of Georgia, Mississippi, and Alabama. So not the best of Labor Days, that's for sure. High pressure, though, will build over the eastern Great Lakes and actually in western Massachusetts, back into New York and Pennsylvania. You wouldn't know that a hurricane was lurking and looming here off the coast. Has very nice conditions expected here. Then we will watch another cold front as it slides across the central Minnesota, bringing some rain showers and the threat of maybe some scattered thunderstorms around Minneapolis later this afternoon. And the next system approaching the Pacific Northwest coast. So precipitation with this front will be minimal, but across the southeast as the showers will pretty much be quite persistent. We'll find some heavier amounts in the rain gauges, as much as 1/2 of an inch to an inch in some cases. Afternoon highs are expected generally in the 80s because of the clouds and the rain, and overnight low temperatures you can see we have 60s and even some 50s to the north, and there you see your 40s and 30s over the northern Rockies as we wake up to temperatures this morning actually in the 30s and 40s here. Okay, your afternoon highs today, 90s here in Texas and back across the southwest, but everywhere else we have temperatures fairly seasonal, as this is unofficially anyway the beginning of fall season, if you will. Fall season doesn't officially get here until the end of the month, but nevertheless, when we talk about Labor Day, we certainly see the ends of summer coming. Here's a look at the afternoon highs forecast tomorrow. Still 80s up and down the eastern seaboard, and then your 90s start to build back into Texas, into North Dakota, and then even these 90s start to get bumped down actually and replaced by 80s on Thursday. So the coolest readings you find over the Pacific Northwest with highs only in the 60s and 70s. More scattered showers expected over the southeast now, with our moisture increasing here, moving into the Ohio River Valley and then heading northward around Pittsburgh on Wednesday. So just a soggy scenario over much of the southeast the next several days. Then that whole mass will move to the north, including maybe Philadelphia on Thursday, and you can see on Friday maybe around New York City, and then our next system kind of slides from Minnesota and brings some rain showers, and then Friday we can see the showers here.
Severe weather coverage from the Weather Channel Forecast Center.
A very pleasant Monday morning to you. Thank you so much for joining us on the Weather Channel. It is about 4:30 Eastern Time, and I'm Vivian Brown coming to you live from the Forecast Center here with the very latest, of course, on Edouard. You know, it's the system we've been watching for you the last several days for sure, as Edouard continues to cause problems. It's still of major concern as it gets closer to the coast here of Massachusetts. It's only a Category 1 now on the Saffir-Simpson scale, opposed to earlier in its lifetime it was at least a Category 4 at its strongest. Now this is Category 1, but it's still of main concern because of its proximity to the coast here of Massachusetts. It is centered at 39.8 degrees north, 69.5 degrees west. That makes it about 105 miles southeast of Nantucket Island, with winds of 90 miles an hour with our hurricane. It is moving to the north at 14, and the lowest pressure we could find 961 millibars. Our latest satellite picture shows the expansive cloudiness now covering much of New England here, and we've had reports of winds out of the north at Nantucket and near Martha's Vineyard up to some 30 and 40 miles an hour, and gusts have been reportedly higher. Now here's a look at our strike probability. The best chance now is that it will skirt right just along the coast here of Massachusetts and the Cape Cod area. As you can see, our red shading shows the center of the storm will move just east of Nantucket Island and around Chatham in eastern Massachusetts. And when we talk of Chatham, we think of our very own Bill Keneally, who's standing by live in Chatham this morning. I know it's a rude awakening this morning, Bill, but good morning.
Thank you, Vivian. Good morning to everybody. Yes, it is. It's not so lovely a day on this Labor Day, the close of the summer season for a lot of folks in this part of the country. The wind is still blowing like crazy. I'd say it's gusting at times close to 50 miles per hour. Just to my right is the beach. This is Nantucket Sound. And looking out to my right, all the way out on a clear day, you can almost see Nantucket. And that is where the problems are going to be as far as a north to south flow of wind. Maybe Nantucket Harbor may see some flooding. Right here, that should not be a concern. The problem is going to be on the Cape Cod Bay. And over in that area, we're watching very carefully the goings-on around Dennis and Brewster, as a wind which had been from the northeast is now from the north. So it's more of a due-south trajectory. And anywhere east of Barnstable Harbor, there will be a pretty high chance of flooding later on today.
Absolutely. We have reports of expected storm surge around the Cape Cod Bay area up to some 9 to 12 feet. So very dangerous conditions. What about the winds there, Bill? It looks a little windy this morning.
It is a little windy, Vivian. It's not quite as wet, though. The rain is not quite as incessant as it was last night. And the wind direction has changed a bit. It's starting to back a little bit now. It had been out of the northeast. Now it's more out of the north. And as Hurricane EDOUARD will pass just to our south and east, we'll watch that wind continue to back around, moving in a counterclockwise direction around to the northwest. And at that time, hopefully, things will improve around the late morning hours.
Okay. Well, certainly we'll be coming back to you every half hour for the very latest.
Okay.
And thank you so much, Bill, for braving the storm for us here at the Weather Channel. Thanks, Bill. I'll tell you what, we've had some big problems with our hurricane. Again, now it's a Category 1, but still we do have some problems with hurricane warnings and watches still in effect. Let's give you the very latest. Tropical storm warnings remain in effect along the coast of Maine from East Point all the way to the Merrimack River area. And you can see parts of Long Island, a tropical storm warning has been issued. Now, hurricane warnings remain in effect from Watch Hill, Rhode Island, all the way to the Merrimack River area, as the center of the storm is expected to skirt just east of the Nantucket Island. So we do have some problems at least over the next 6 to 12 hours with our hurricane and its close proximity to the east coast here. Winds have been gusting out of the north and northeast in excess of 40 and up to 50 miles an hour at times. So right along the Cape Cod Bay, we've had reports of very, very gusty winds. And again, storm surges will be extremely high. We're expecting storm surge of about 9 to 12 feet in the Cape Cod Bay area. Very windy, and it's been wet so far this morning, too, as you can see that the rain's coming from the east and moving west as they rotate around our area of low pressure, or Hurricane EDOUARD, just off coast. Of course, we'll keep you updated on EDOUARD, so keep it here tuned to the Weather Channel for the latest.
Right now, the weather is changing. What's here today can be gone tomorrow. Because we know you need to plan and prepare, we
ease down a little bit. Usually these storms, when they sort of swing up there, they a lot of times take off. They move to the northeast, move out over oceans, you get caught up and swing by real quickly. Does this one look like it might be one of those types?
Yeah, I think we're going to see that later this afternoon. It'll begin to move east, and then we'll see the thing accelerate towards Nova Scotia and be in a position near Nova Scotia later on tonight.
Okay, Jim, thanks very much. We'll check back with you as the morning progresses. And right now, let's go back to the Weather Channel studios. Vivian Brown has a look at your Labor Day forecast.
Tell you what, not only are we dealing with our Hurricane EDOUARD in northern New England, but also we're dealing with Hurricane Fran here north of the islands, and it's churning the waters and causing problems. Let's get a little bit closer and get the latest on Fran for you. You can see we've enhanced our satellite picture and put on some colored cloud tops to show you our deep convection. You can see it's well north of the islands here. This being Puerto Rico, this is Hispaniola, the Bahamas here. Fran is a fairly large hurricane in terms of overall sea surface, and you can see that it is centered at 23.4 degrees north, 66 degrees west. That makes it about 715 miles east-southeast of Nassau, Bahamas. Winds with Fran of 80 miles an hour, so it's a Category 1 also on the Saffir-Simpson scale. It is moving to the west-northwest at 10, and the estimated lowest pressure we could find is 979 millibars. We will keep you posted on the latest with Fran. Of course, there is severe weather over the lower 48 that we have to tell you about, as the threat of thunderstorms exists here over the Gulf Coast and parts of the lower Mississippi Valley. We are watching a surface cold front as it slides across the northern plains into the western Great Lakes area. We've had some thunderstorms already with this surface front. You can see over the western parts of Minnesota, these storms are moving off to the east-southeast at about 20 miles an hour. So Minneapolis, the threat of thunderstorm activity for you later today, again as our surface front moves to the east. Here is a look at the midday hour as we will push our front again to the east, a little bit closer to Minneapolis, St. Paul later on. High pressure will build in the wake of the front and a nicer day over Montana and the northern Rockies. But with our area of low pressure here and a deep tropical air mass over the southeast, it will continue soggy throughout the day today, from parts of Louisiana into Mississippi, Alabama, and Georgia. And as we go through time, some of this moisture will feed northward. As a matter of fact, we'll have more details on our system over the southeast in just a moment. So stay with us here on the Weather Channel.
This is a special edition of WeatherScope. Comprehensive severe weather coverage from the Weather Channel Forecast Center.
Good morning, everyone. For the Weather Channel Forecast Center, I'm Bruce Edwards as we continue to monitor Hurricane EDOUARD as it makes its Labor Day assault on the coastal sections of New England, particularly on the Cape Cod this morning. We take a look at the particulars now from the National Hurricane Center as of 5 a.m. this morning, and EDOUARD was centered at 40.3 degrees north, 69.2 west. So that places the center of the hurricane 80 miles southeast of Nantucket Island, Massachusetts. Its top sustained winds are still holding together at 80 miles per hour. It is continuing its northerly track at a pretty brisk pace at about 14 miles per hour. Central pressure 28.35 inches of mercury, or 960 millibars, and it continues to move in that northerly track. We want to again advise that from Woods Hole, Massachusetts to Plymouth, Mass, hurricane warnings are in effect. That's just about the entire Cape Cod and islands vicinity. Hurricane warnings are in effect. Storm surge, when the storm center passes over the Cape, could be anywhere from 6 to 10 feet, especially in the north-facing beaches of Cape Cod. They're getting a very stiff northerly wind there, and that'll pile up the water in a mighty big hurry, 3 to 6, just about everywhere else along the Cape for today. Now, the tropical storm force winds are being felt all up the coast of eastern Massachusetts and as far west as Montauk Point and the eastern parts of Long Island. But the hurricane force winds, as you'll note, in the orange shading are still very far offshore. Strike probability of the center of the hurricane passing within 60 miles of a point on the coast, as you can see, just absolutely just shaving the coastal sections of Cape Cod as it continues in that northerly track, and it's anticipated it'll start to take a little more of a turn towards the northeast a little later on today. Here's a look at the radar, and again, you're going to see feeder bands of moisture spiraling around like the mainspring on a $2 wristwatch, just smoking through, and so again, you get heavy squally weather, then a bit of a respite, and then things will start to kick in again. You see areas of locally heavy downpours just off Boston in this area right in through here, working its way on towards the southwest, and once again, they'll continue to get squally weather, gusty winds. The Cape getting some heavy rains during the last hour, other lighter rains as you see over Long Island Sound and in the eastern portions of Long Island at the present time. Now, this is not what the vacationers have ordered for a Labor Day weekend, the unofficial ending of summer, the last big blowout. Well, in Chatham, Massachusetts, the big blowout is EDOUARD so far, with those gusty winds howling along Cape Cod. At the elbow at Chatham, Massachusetts, right on the Cape, it was the assault all night long as the winds whipped around. Now, high tide was about 3 o'clock this morning, and the wind pushed water levels up on the north-facing beaches, and we've got another high tide scheduled for later on, about 2:40 this afternoon. And once again, the swift northerly winds really piling up the water, and again, as the lighthouse sends out its beacon to those away. We check the situation out now, live and on the scene. The Weather Channel's Bill Keneally has been perched on the Cape. Bill, what's the situation out there right now?
Bruce, it's 5:30 in the morning here on Cape Cod, and we're right there at the elbow, right at the southeastern tip of Cape Cod here in Chatham. Once in a while, you can catch the glimpse of the Chatham light as it turns around, and again, we're still looking at daybreak in about 30 minutes or so. The hurricane waddling northward at about 14 miles per hour, and it is moving rather slowly now. Our wind last night had been from the northeast. It's now starting to back some, though, from the north. We're not getting protection from the hotel anymore, and I got to tell you, it's like a funneling effect whipping down the parking lot here. To my right is Nantucket Sound, and out here we've heard news not very good out of Nantucket itself. There's no power whatsoever on Nantucket Island, many trees down on the island, and also there's reports of some flooding now around the Nantucket Harbor. And by the way, Bruce, that would be about 20 miles south of us.
Well, of course, the trees still in full bloom, full foliage, full leaf. That hasn't turned yet, and they haven't fallen, so I guess that would, again, cause some problems with the power out there, and that might be one of the biggest concerns that they have at the present time.
That is right, Bruce. We've had sporadic power outages here on the Cape itself. At our hotel room, we had no power from roughly around 1 to 3 a.m. Then miraculously it came back on, but still a lot of surges with the electricity at this time, and the wind is definitely picking up. While it is turning more to the north, it is getting gustier. I'm guessing gusting 55 to maybe 60 miles per hour, and it looks like that eye wall, what is left of it, will probably be strafing this part of the Cape in the next 4 to 5 hours.
Okay, Bill, batten down the hatches, buddy, and we'll check back with you in about 30 minutes. Right now I'm joined in the Forecast Center by Jim Wilson, one of the Weather Channel leading forecasters. And Jim, it's sort of remarkable in that the storm is held together pretty well despite being over the colder waters and heading on up the coast.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. Water temperatures in the near 70 and the mid-60s. Usually you see these things begin to unravel. So it's interesting. The latest recon that just went in there, we found 960 millibars, and that's actually a little lower than what we saw during the evening. So the center of the storm is holding together rather well. So a strong Category 1 storm as it rounds on the outer part of the Cape, and we expect the winds to continue to be up till at least 1 o'clock or so as the storm turns around the outer edge of the Cape.
When do we anticipate maybe seeing some of this turn more towards the northeast?
Okay, the forecast is for it to continue to move kind of north for the next 12 hours or so, and then we'll begin to see it affected by the jet stream level winds and begin to rip off towards the Nova Scotia area by later tonight. But for the first 12 hours, it continues to move northward, right towards Nova Scotia and the Gulf of Maine, and then the jet stream winds will pick it up and it'll race east. Typically, we begin to see these things really race off after they get picked up by the winds, but hold together pretty good, and it'll give Cape Cod quite a blow this morning. Hurricane force winds probably in the next hour or two in the outer parts of Nantucket and the outer Cape. Where Bill is in Chatham, we expect the winds to continue to be 50 miles an hour in gusts as the rain bands swirl. And in fact, Boston, Mass right now has a rain gust of 32 miles per hour, and one of the squalls has moved in there. So from Boston down to the Cape, it looks like we have a pretty squally morning this morning.
Okay, so besides the Red Sox, Edouard will be on the front page of the Boston Globe.
Yeah, the Red Sox made a comeback, and I don't think Edward's going to make a comeback. We're going to get it out of there.
Okay, let's hope so. Thanks very much, Jim Wilson, and thank you for joining us. We'll have a complete update in about 30 minutes. Right now, let's find out about the rest of your holiday weekend and a little bit about Fran from Vivian Brown.
Well, thanks, Bruce. Yeah, we do have the latest on Fran. Of course, this is Edouard across northern New England, but here is Fran, and it's our second concern here as it continues to churn the waters just north of the island. It's well north of Puerto Rico, well north of Hispaniola, and over 700 miles east of the Bahamas, so we still have some time to watch Fran. Let's get a little bit closer and put on the colored cloud cups, which shows the deeper convection with our hurricane. Now, yeah, Fran is a hurricane also, packing winds of about 80 to 90 miles an hour, and still some deep convection, although the deep convection is not totally circulating around the center. We have the deepest convection on the east and south side of the center right about here, and that puts it at about 23.4 degrees north, 66 degrees west. Again, 715 miles east-southeast of Nassau, Bahamas, with winds of 80 miles an hour. It is moving to the west-northwest at 10, and the lowest pressure we could find 979 millibars with Hurricane Fran. We'll continue to watch Fran for you as we go through the day today, and of course this entire week perhaps we'll be dealing with Fran, as it will be on Wednesday and Thursday as it gets closer and closer to the Bahamas, and then we don't know where it's going to go after that. So big interest here with Fran once we get Edouard out of the picture. We do have something else to tell you about as we're watching storms develop. They'll be scattered over the Gulf Coast here already this morning. We've had some storms just west of Tallahassee, the panhandle of Florida, and some pretty powerful storms moving across the central northern plains here into the western Great Lakes. So the surface cold front that will be moving through. Already ahead of that surface cold front, we have some pretty powerful storms. They've been pushing through the western parts here of Minnesota, generally moving off to the east at about 20 to 25 miles an hour. They are well west of Minneapolis, St. Paul so far this morning, but watch out, Minneapolis. Thunderstorms are expected for you later today as our surface cold front moves off to the east. Here is the midday hour, and this is the cold front we are talking about. Low pressure to the south here, keeping it very unsettled and quite soggy. The low clouds and the steady light rain will loom over the southeast throughout the day today, so not the best of Labor Days, that's for sure. Okay, across the rest of New England, it's looking good. As a matter of fact, in western Massachusetts, western New York, western Long Island, you wouldn't even know that we have a hurricane here lurking and looming off the New England coast. But we'll get it out of the way, and actually the rest of the week looks pretty good, even for Boston. We'll have more details on that forecast coming up. David, pick up.
21 years from now, David will be 6'2" and weigh 210 pounds. He will lead the NFL in rushing with 2,272 yards.
David!
And he will have eaten 3,486 bowls of warm, nutritious Quaker instant oatmeal. Mostly apples and cinnamon. When he is honored as Player of the Year, he'll make a short speech in which he'll say,
Thanks, Mom.
Quaker oatmeal. Oh, what those oats can do.
Hurricane Edouard is bearing down on New England. Stay with the Weather Channel for comprehensive, up-to-the-minute forecasts and analysis. Now your local forecast.
America's most sought-after video has finally come home. Cops, Too Hot for TV, what the censors would not let you see, is now available at a video store near you. This explosive video contains the most shocking footage ever recorded for cops. From the wacky to the wild. It's uncut, uncensored,
Again, we've got some very messy conditions currently across southern New England, and one of the hardest hit spots, at least so far, feeling the brunt of this hurricane has been around the Chatham, Massachusetts area. These are scenes that we shot from last night, showing the winds howling along Cape Cod. At the elbow of Cape Cod, this is right around Chatham, Massachusetts, which is around the elbow. They've had the assault of the strong winds overnight. High tide, too, has been reported about 3 o'clock this morning, and the winds really helped to push some high water levels across the north-facing beaches. And right in the midst of all that nasty weather is our very own Bill Keneally. He's live right now in Chatham, Massachusetts. Bill, can you give us an idea about the latest conditions right now on Cape Cod?
I sure can, Cheryl. It's very, very windy out here. I'm guessing winds are from the north now, gusting maybe 55 to possibly as high as 60 miles per hour. The rain has abated somewhat. It's not near as heavy as it was on our shot about 30 minutes ago. And as you can see behind me, dawn is breaking. Right overhead, right over my hat, is actually the lighthouse here at Chatham, Mass. That was breaking the darkness all night long. We've had sporadic power outages. Nothing real widespread here on the mainland, but the news is not near as good out on Nantucket. No power whatsoever. There's a lot of trees down, and there's also a fair amount of water now starting to flood some of the harbor area. And by the way, Cheryl, to my right is Nantucket Sound. The island of Nantucket would be about 20 miles due south of here.
Bill, this is a big holiday weekend. Have you found some folks kind of like packing it in early and only having a 2-day holiday as opposed to a 3-day holiday?
Oh, yeah. Very, very much so. We had a 25-mile tie-up yesterday afternoon, Cheryl. 25-mile backup on Highway 6 heading westbound over the Sagamore Bridge. There are really two main routes out off of the Cape. One would be Highway 6, the other Route 28. And Highway 6 is the main one, and the traffic tie-up was just astronomical. I came through about 8 o'clock last night, and even then there was about a 9-mile tie-up at that time. I want to mention one other thing. You talked about the storm surge, and it is a problem, not as much here in Nantucket Sound as our wind is pushing the water on out, but over the Cape Cod Bay area, that is a concern. The last tide was about 3:30 this morning, but it wasn't that bad. They said the tides ran about 2 to 3 feet above normal, but it looks like with the hurricane slowing down, we may have to deal with another high tide of concern at about 3 o'clock this afternoon.
Thanks, Bill. We appreciate the update, and we'll be checking back with you periodically throughout the morning hours. Well, also with us this morning, we have our very own senior meteorologist, Jim Wilson. And, Jim, what I find so unusual about this hurricane is that hurricanes like to feed off of very warm waters, and the water temperatures are very cool around New England. So,
yeah, it's very unusual to see this storm. The pressure last weekend actually saw the pressure drop in the middle. So even though it's over colder water, I think it's beginning to take on a little extra tropical characteristics, and it continues to deepen. So we'll say the storm will hold its own for the next 12 hours or so as it begins to move towards Nova Scotia as it rounds around the Cape. One other interesting point that Bill said, in the last big hurricane we had in this region was Hurricane Bob in 1991, and I think with the results of that, people are really heeding the warnings and getting out of there, and that's probably good. But the good news with this hurricane is it's much different than Bob, is that it's only a Category 1 storm, so it's minimal hurricane as it rounds the outer part of the Cape. So the outer part of the Cape, the Elbow, Cape, Provincetown, down through the eastern area, that's where the worst of the storm winds will be, and we're expecting about 75 miles per hour in gusts, especially to about 1 o'clock p.m., and then the storm begins to move away. The good thing we see on the satellite is that there's a strong band of winds across the Canadian border, and as it moves a little further northward, it will begin to get into that wind and then get ripped out towards Nova Scotia later tonight. So once it gets in those winds, it'll really take off.
And you were making a comment earlier comparing this hurricane with possible nor'easters that we've had in the past, and how is the comparison with that?
Well, I'm a hardy New Englander, and so what I see on the map right now looks pretty much like a nor'easter, and the winds we're seeing are very reminiscent of a very strong nor'easter. So this region of the country can take some strong winds to about hurricane force, and you get above 75 miles per hour, though, then you run into the trouble. The difference that it would be in the nor'easter, though, is that the trees still have their leaves on this time of year, and so that's the big concern, is that the trees may come down in the strong winds and affect the power. As Bill already said, the power is out pretty much in a lot of part of that the country because of that. Right. That's the difference between a nor'easter and this storm, is that the leaves are still there, and that's the reason why we're having the problems with power, I think.
Yeah, and probably the worst is yet to come in about 3 o'clock or so this afternoon, around the time of high tide.
I would say the next 6 hours or so, as the storm begins to move up along the Cape Cod area, that the winds will continue to plow water into the north-facing beaches, especially around Barnstable Harbor and that place there, and high tides are around 3 p.m., so we expect the problems with tides are not over yet. I think the next tide that comes around could be the worst of the tides, with storm surges like 3 to 6 feet, maybe as much as 8 feet in that Barnstable Harbor area.
Okay, thanks, Jim. We appreciate the update. Well, Hurricane Edouard's not the only story that we have to talk about today. Let's go back to the studios. We'll check out the weather across the rest of the country with Marshall.
Thanks, Cheryl. Thanks, Jim. That's right. We have Fran out in the Atlantic, and Fran is gaining some strength. Another hurricane headed our way. Let's take a look at it on the water vapor imagery. You can see Edouard, as Cheryl was just talking about, and you saw Bill Keneally up there in Chatham, Massachusetts. A lot of wind, power outages on Nantucket Island, but to the south in the Atlantic is Fran. And
else just doesn't sound as good. It's the richest coffee in the world.
And then you walk out into the cold north.
Hurricane Edouard is bearing down on New England. Stay with the Weather Channel for comprehensive, up-to-the-minute forecasts and analysis. Now your local forecast.
Again, eastern fringes of Long Island also seeing the winds really, really picking up in earnest. Now, as we were mentioning, some of the worst conditions so far have been felt across eastern Massachusetts, and we have some pictures to show you of how bad the weather really has been over the last few hours or so. And because this is a Holiday weekend. Well, some folks chose to turn a 3-day holiday weekend into 2 days by getting off of Cape Cod. Traffic was heavy on the way out, and those who stayed witnessed a full night of high winds and heavy rain. Perhaps not what you would be expecting for a holiday weekend. And right in the midst of all that nasty weather, we have our very own Bill Keneally. He's been up in Chatham, Massachusetts. Bill, can you give us an update about the latest weather conditions right now for Chatham?
Well, Cheryl, safe to say it's not your prototype Labor Day weekend weather here out in the Cape. You mentioned yesterday people making a mass exodus. They call it the Great Cape Escape. And at times there was a 25-mile backup to the Sagamore Bridge heading west on Route 6. My cameraman Jason is panning out now towards the water and looking beyond that gazebo. You can see those trees are really starting to get whacked by that wind. The wind is now from the north, and that is gusting as high. We're estimating now 60 to maybe 65 miles per hour. It is starting to turn a little more now north to maybe north-northwest. That's probably good news, telling us that the center very likely will pass just to our east. But Cheryl, we're as far south and east as one can get on Cape Cod, with the Chatham Lighthouse just behind that building behind me.
You were talking about the trees in the background and the full foliage. How much of an impact has that had on the weather?
Not too bad so far. You mentioned the trees do have a lot of leaves on them, so it is weighting them down some. There's also been a lot of rain overnight. I would say this had to be 3 or 4 inches of rain so far. But August had been fairly dry, so I don't think the soil is that saturated. And being as it is sandy, it is rather porous. So the trees are not being taken down by the saturated soil as much as just that unrelenting north wind. And you mentioned hurricane force winds now on Nantucket Island. Behind me is Nantucket Sound, and Nantucket Island's about 20 miles due south of here.
How extensive have some of the power outages been around that general area?
Not too bad here at the hotel. We've had some flickering in the past hour. Now, we stayed at a hotel about a mile away, getting pretty gusty right now. And we had power out for a couple of hours between around 1 a.m. and 3 a.m. But we haven't had any reports of widespread outages on Cape Cod, and even around Nantucket in the past hour, they've gotten quite a bit of power back. But again, now getting some hurricane force winds out there.
Okay, thanks, Bill. We appreciate you weathering the storm for us. We'll be checking back with you probably in the next 30 minutes or so keep it tuned. Now, also with us live in the studio, we have our very own Jim Wilson, and he's a senior meteorologist here. And Jim, what I find so unusual about this hurricane is that the water temperatures are so cool around New England, and yet this hurricane has been able to maintain itself.
Yeah, very unusual. You know, we've had a persistent trough in the eastern half of the nation, and the temps are a little cooler than they normally would be. They're in about the mid-60s around the Cape, and in 70 where the hurricane is now. So it's very unusual for the storm to continue to hold its spread. The recon did find 960 millibars. In fact, the pressure went down a little bit. So I think there's a little bit of the cold core working its way in there, maybe interacting and allowing it to deepen a little bit. But it is unusual to see the thing deepen with cooler water.
We were talking about the high tides too. One high tide this morning was around 3 o'clock this morning, but there's another high tide later this afternoon. And what can we expect during that time?
Well, I'm really concerned about Barnstable Harbor, which is in the north-facing area where the winds are driving into the south of Cape Cod Bay. The storm is supposed to go around the outer Cape around 1 p.m., and as the winds continue to drive in, there'll be another high tide, and I expect the storm surge to probably be the worst there. At 3 a.m., we saw like 2 to 3 feet, and it wasn't a problem. But as we go this afternoon, I think